So again, reframing just means taking a problem and recasting it in a new way, seeing it in a different way or from a new perspective. You're taking the same facts of the matter, but reinterpreting so that they have a different meaning or significance. Here's an example of a reframe. In the 2011 Masters golf tournament, Rory McIlroy went into the final day with a good lead, but then he blew it. He had what's been described as a meltdown. He failed to win the competition, presumably because nerves got the better of him. Later, he described that day as the most important day of his career. That's a reframe. Actually, top sports people do it a lot. Basically, he turned an abject failure into something of real value. The value being that he realized he had to learn to handle pressure. And indeed, later in his career, that's exactly what he did. Of course, he still lost that day. It didn't change the fact of the matter, but he changed the story in his head to one where he may actually have felt quite grateful that it happened to him. Implicit in the idea of reframing is that we encounter situations in life which don't have inherent meaning or significance, but we create that meaning by how we think about them. And we actually have quite a bit of freedom over how we do that. Actually, I've already touched on a more general example of a reframe in part 2 of this module when I talked about the growth mindset, which, remember, is the view that problems can be overcome by effort and commitment. Suppose you failed an exam. From the point of view of a fixed mindset, this is evidence of your shortcomings, your inherent lack of ability and talent. But the growth mindset sees it as just a temporary setback, an indication that you need to put in more hard work and application in order to pass it next time. In the growth mindset, a failure is never really a failure, it's just feedback or an opportunity for learning. So reframing is fundamentally about the thoughts we have about situations. It's about stories in our head. It's about finding a new story that's constructive, spurs us to positive action, or opens up new ideas about what to do. Or it simply makes us feel better. So reframing is useful for problems or situations where there seems to be no solution. They look like no-win situations. Reframing doesn't offer solutions to insoluble problems, it just changes the frame of reference to a different but related problem, one that can be solved. In a way, it's just about asking the right question. Take the old chestnut, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Answering either yes or no, you're condemned. If you never actually beat your wife, then it's just the wrong question to ask. So often the first step in working with real problems is to find the right question, if you like. Reframing is very often about taking a broader perspective, taking in more of the situation. Here's a simple example. Suppose you ring a friend and leave them a message, but they don't call you back. Hours later, you're feeling pretty bad about it. If you assume that they got your message, but just didn't bother to call you back, you'll feel bad. You may start wondering if you did something wrong, or maybe they just don't like you. Reframing could mean simply considering different possibilities. Maybe they weren't feeling well and just went to bed and turned off their phone. Or maybe they're having a very busy day and had no time to call you back. So when you consider these possibilities, you don't feel so bad. Or reframes can change the focus or the emphasis within the problem context so that you see the real problem is not that, but this. This is very often what's needed in cases of stress and anxiety. A naive goal might be to avoid anxiety or prevent it from arising. That's problematic for reasons I'm about to go into, but basically it's not really possible to completely prevent stress arising. Rory McIlroy knew he couldn't avoid pressure, he had to learn to deal with it. So a more realistic goal would be to learn how to recover from stress. What we're doing is substituting an insoluble problem for a related problem that is much more workable. At this point, I'm reminded of the famous prayer that they use in the Alcoholics Anonymous organization. Paraphrasing it, it's suggesting that what we all need is 3 things. First, the courage to address changes we're capable of making. Second, the serenity to accept the things that we can't do anything about. And third, the wisdom to know the difference. I'd like to turn to another reframe. This one is an example of changing the emphasis of a problem. It's the quicksand metaphor, and it's quite a fundamentally important reframe for our purposes in this course. Let's go back to a common problem that I first mentioned in the introduction of the course, insomnia. So you're lying in bed and you can't get to sleep. It seems like the harder you try, or the more you want to get to sleep, the further away from sleep you actually are. Probably we've all been there. The reframe is to see this as an example of the quicksand trap. Quicksand is a metaphor. In quicksand, if you struggle, you'll sink down further. Quicksand doesn't have a magical power to suck you down. If you don't struggle, you'll float. Struggling doesn't work because you don't have solid ground to work against. So the quicksand trap means any situation where trying harder makes things worse. And there are lots of examples in life. Sleep is just one of them. Trying really hard doesn't get you to sleep. So in the sort of quicksand situations that I'm talking about, the problem is in your own mind, and you're trying to use your mind to get away from part of your mind. Again, you don't have solid ground to push against.